Hey friends, welcome back. We're looking at how do we apply the stories that God has put on our heart. And we walked through kind of our four key questions, or 5 questions we discussed in the last video. I've got Elsie Jane back with me, and we want to just kind of model, just do a brief demonstration of how you would kind of unpack one of the treasures that you discovered in step number 4. How could you unpack that using these questions? So we're going to jump back into one of the stories we've referred to earlier in a previous video, the one of Mary and Martha. And Elsie, you told that to us last time. Can you just give us kind of the opening, just the opening, like beginning of that story for us?
Yeah. So Jesus and his disciples entered a certain village, and there was a woman named Martha, and she welcomed them into her home.
Okay, we're going to stop the story there. I love this story, and I love this choice. Let's go back. Remember in our observation, digging for treasures questions, we're asking choice questions. Martha chooses to welcome Jesus and his disciples to her home. Good choice, bad choice? What do you think?
Pretty good choice.
Yeah, seems like a really good choice. Inviting Jesus is always a good choice. But then pretty quickly, what happens?
She becomes overwhelmed.
She gets overwhelmed. So she's invited Jesus into something. She's trying to serve and take care of him, and she's overwhelmed. I think a lot of us can identify with that. That's pretty normal. And yet, I want us to unpack that. Let's make that our treasure. And then let's kind of ask our 4 application questions kind of about that. Martha invited Jesus into her home. She was welcoming Jesus, and then she became overwhelmed with this situation. So, Elsie Jane, this is our first question. Does that happen today? Do people today invite Jesus into something or to try and do something for Jesus and get overwhelmed?
They do, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Could you give us an illustration? What does that look like today?
People get overwhelmed with work, school, they volunteer at church, they do all these things for Jesus and they get overwhelmed.
Yeah, 100%. You're trying to be a good witness at work. You're trying to share Jesus with your friends at school. You're volunteering at church, and suddenly you find yourself overwhelmed, not sure how to go forward. And you're doing this for Jesus, but it feels scary or hard. Yeah, I think we can all identify with that.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, third question. Has this ever happened to you?
1 or 2 times.
1 or 2 times. Is there any specific example of maybe when you felt like, hey, I was trying to do this for God and I got overwhelmed? Anything stand out?
I don't really know. Maybe you could tell about the house.
Oh, yeah. That's a good illustration. So our family has been in transition recently, and God, in a really special way, provided a house for our family, and that's been a big blessing. It's interesting though. We've invited Jesus into the house. We want God to be in our home, in the space where we live. But it's interesting. The space has felt overwhelming. It needs a new roof. It needs painting. We've had issues with the plumbing. There's lots of other kind of challenges that go with the house. And so it's one of those things where, in a sense, it's not a ministry activity. It's something as, we could say as kind of mundane as where you live. But it has become a place where, yes, this is God's provision for our family. This is God's house. Praise Jesus. And now we feel overwhelmed. How do we pay for all these repairs? Where do we get the time? Like, who are we going to get to help us? It has felt overwhelming. So again, that's not a ministry situation, but that is a place where we've invited God into something. He's provided. Yes, this is such a good thing, and we're overwhelmed by it. So, like Martha. Yeah, exactly. So this is my question. Remember, the 4th question is, what could we learn from this story that could help us in our present day situation? Do you have any suggestions? Any thoughts?
Well, the rest of the story, she invited Jesus into her home, and then she got overwhelmed, and instead of taking it back to Jesus and telling him that she was overwhelmed, she just tried to keep on going and scolded him for not doing anything.
That's so interesting. I love that. And I love this story for that. She gets overwhelmed, but then instead of kind of humbly going back and acknowledging, Jesus, I actually need some help. she kind of scolds Jesus. Lord, don't you care? And there's no humility. It's like she kind of keeps persevering and then kind of scolds Jesus that it's not going the way she wants. I can say that applies to us, our family. It's like, okay, God, you've provided for this house. It needs some work. God, could you actually come through and could you show us? How do we prioritize? How do you want us to pay for the things that need to happen? How do we come back to him? So not in a scolding sort of way, not being overwhelmed, but in a posture of humility to say, we need some help here. What would it look like for God to actually help us in this situation?
Yeah.
Jesus is very gentle with Martha in the story. Remember, this is kind of our last question. Where's God in the story? I'm wondering, do you think Jesus cares about our family's housing situation?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. If he's gentle with Martha, do you think he can be gentle with us?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Is he going to be gentle with difficult situations that our listeners are going through?
Yeah.
Yeah, we think so. We think so. Again, we're just trying to model something. Go back. Our observation was Martha got overwhelmed trying to do something for God. And we just were looking at that, kind of using our 4 application questions. Does that happen today? In what way? Has it happened to you? What can we learn from the story? And then kind of our bonus question, what do we learn about Jesus or God in this situation that could apply for each of us? So again, great job. We feel like these questions will help us apply the story in real practical ways. And you can ask them kind of for each of kind of the major treasures that God gives to you from your story. So, well done.